Remember how I've often referenced that the AFL-CIO used to be called the AFL-CIA by leftists from the 1960s and 70s? And I'll remember how many times I've talked about that with the AFL-CIO, the largest union in America, acting as its international branch was the constant muscle arm of the CIA in the 60s and 70s. This all came out in the church committee hearings and disclosures in the 60s and 70s. So I just think it's funny that this guy's handle is called the AFL-CIA. But Zohran Mamdani's father, Mahmoud Mamdani, was brought over to the U.S. on the same CIA-linked Airlift Africa project that Barack Obama's CIA asset, Barack Obama Sr., was. This is from a book called White Malice, which I've listened to about 30-40% of as an audiobook. It's just like super leftist, so it's like hard to slog through, but it's got interesting. It's basically about the CIA's role in post-colonial Africa. The Airlift Africa project, as it was called, had already brought a number of African students to study in the U.S., including Washington Okumu from Kenya. In 1962, it would bring Barack Obama Sr., the father of former President Barack Obama. The project was underwritten by the Kennedy Foundation and the African American Students Foundation. She, the actor Sidney Poitier, baseball player Jackie Robinson, all gave time and funds to the foundation in their wish to support the education of young people in Africa. But Airlift Africa was more than simply a project to educate young people. It was linked to the CIA as a sheep dipping project intended to groom future pro-American leaders of newly independent English-speaking states in Africa. Okumu, as someone who wanted very much to become a leader of his country, was the kind of candidate who fitted the bill perfectly. There was growing suspicion by now in Kenya, the U.S. and elsewhere, that Mbuya was working for the CIA, which triggered concern about the Airlift Africa project. Again, this is the same exchange programs to build diplomatic dialogue with emerging leaders so that you can back channel with them that they'll give Foggy Bottom, the State Department, what it wants if the U.S., the CIA, NED, the NGOplex, backs them for president. By late 1962, the airlift had been almost completely taken over by the State Department and its direct grantees. Again, State Department is the mother of the CIA. And the care of and feeding of students in the U.S. had similarly devolved upon agencies other than the AASF, the African Airlift. The 1962 airlift was broader than the one in 61-62, the last of the series, in which, now, mind you, USAID was created in 1961, so this airlift was the year after that. The program was broader and filled a new generation of East Africans, most of them born after World War II. But the 1963 airliftees were also younger than those in previous groups, went to the U.S., went to college. Among the 1963 group were Mahmoud Mamdani, his father. So Zohran Mamdani's father was brought to the United States in a CIA State Department program, the same one that brought over Barack Obama's father. And both Zohran Mamdani in Uganda and Barack Obama in Kenya, these are both East African countries. Okay, let's see. Okay, so the first guy they mentioned was an 18-year-old Maasai. He went to Brandeis. In later years, he'd served as the executive chairman of the World Bank and the IMF, and then as Kenya's vice president. Mamdani, a Ugandan, began at the University of Pittsburgh and received a doctorate in government from the Harvard University, probably the Kennedy School, Harvard Kennedy School. A career in academia brought him to prominence in the U.S. and in Africa, notably as a historian of Africa and director of the Institute of African Studies at Columbia University. Now, think about how much we did on Columbia University in area studies. we literally did probably 3 or 4 streams on Columbia University and its role as a CIA shadow diplomacy network, and our streams on area studies and CIA in exactly this time in the 50s and 60s. (1951) declassified 1999. CIA analyst memo. Foundation support for research in the field of behavioral sciences. CIA proposing that the Ford Foundation support political behavior research at Columbia University. Ford Foundation, you'll see Ford Foundation also supports the Mamdani family, just like it did Barack Obama's mother. 1951, declassified 99, written to the Director of Central Intelligence from the Assistant Director of Research. Suggestions on kinds of projects we would like to see the Ford Foundation support. Examples of some projects which might satisfy the above criteria. The establishment of area institutes. The CIA telling the Ford Foundation to fund area institutes in universities. Area institutes in Sovietology, in the Far East, in Indonesia, Indochina, India, Pakistan, Iraq. And then, so African studies and all that. In 1951, is telling the Ford Foundation, hey, put a shit ton of money into big universities and their area studies programs. The establishment of area institutes, area studies. So Russian studies, Middle East studies, Latin American studies, African studies, East Asian studies. Now get this. It is impossible to design intelligent programs of economic assistance, political reorientation, or psychological warfare. The whole point of this is to get the CIA, the Director of Central Intelligence, to convince private foundations to give more money to big universities so that the CIA can use that information for, I'm sorry, can I zoom anymore? Psychological warfare. Now, let's look into this a little bit more. Barack Obama's father identified as CIA asset in U.S. drive to recolonize Africa during early days of the Cold War. Now, mind you, the CIA you saw in this memo right here, the Assistant Director of Research and Reports at the CIA writing to the Director of Central Intelligence at the CIA for the Director of Central Intelligence, the head of the CIA, to talk to the Ford Foundation to suggest things the Ford Foundation could support. So, Obama, Mama, I noted, and by the way, you notice here that they say Indonesia is one of the critical areas of focus for the CIA and Ford Foundation. Literally, Indonesia. Well, what was Barack Obama's mother doing in the 1960s? Ann Dunham worked with several organizations during the 70s and 80s that had intimate CIA connections during the Cold War. These included the Ford Foundation and USAID. As an employee, consultant, grantee, or student with these organizations, she worked on microfinancing projects, which we'll get to later on in this. Her mother, Madeline Dunham, who raised Barack Obama while Ann was on assignment in Indonesia, acted as vice president for the Bank of Hawaii in Honolulu, which was allegedly used by various CIA front entities, Barack Obama's mother's anthropological work, and again, this is what these projects were. They were to study these populations in Indonesia, Indochina, Africa, Eastern Europe, to study their anthropological nature so that the CIA could run political reorientation and psychological operations in order to get them to vote a certain way or to get them to support a certain parliament bill or not, or get them to take to the streets. So you'll see the CIA won funding on intergroup relations and intergroup tensions, human relations research, group dynamics, parapsychology research, social physics, social psychology. Study on the flow of foreign news. Study of influence of group orientation on receptivity to communicated values. Studies on attitude change. Research on Turkish-speaking Muslims in the Soviet Union. Anthropology. Economic development, yada, 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 yada. So that was Obama's mother. Now let's get to this article on Obama's father. Barack Obama's father identified a CIA asset in U.S. drive to recolonize Africa during early days of the Cold War. And keep this word in mind, because Zohran Mamdani's father at Columbia right now as we speak is teaching colonial studies, African colonial studies, post-colonial studies. Over the last decade, the U.S. has been quietly expanding its covert intelligence empire in Africa as part of a growing geopolitical rivalry with China. New book by Susan Williams, White Mouse, the CIA and Covert Recolonization of Africa. She focuses mostly on ties between Ghana and the Congo. The deep CIA penetration of Africa was evident in the agency's apparent recruitment of Barack Obama Sr., a protege of Mamdani, an anti-communist, pro-capitalist from Kenya, who had served as the African representative of the International Confederation of Free Trade Unions, which received covert CIA funding through the AFL-CIO. We're back to the AFL-CIO laundering CIA funds into the AFL-CIO branch representing the workers, the masses in Africa that the CIA wanted to become the prime minister. Obama was brought to the University of Hawaii in exchange and then studied economics at Harvard. And then Mboya was assassinated, the CIA guy. Other strategies took the form of soft power initiatives, the secret sponsorship and infiltration of educational facilities, artistic endeavors, literature, and Africa-focused organizations. She manages to include Barack Obama Sr. in the circle of iniquity. In the late 30s, he had spearheaded the formation of the Council on African Affairs, but by mid-50s it had been forced into liquidation by government harassment, and arising in its stead was the American Committee on Africa, the African American Institute, and the American Society of African Culture. Ghana's diamonds, Congo's uranium, also today it's the cobalt, lithium and cobalt. And there were labor leaders tied to the AFL-CIA. Irving Brown J. Lovestone, the premier U.S. scholar of Angola, who was financially supported by the CIA. Wait, where's the citation for saying that he identified as a CIA? That seems like a very strong claim. I'd like to see an actual... What's the citation for that? Hold on a second. 206 in the book. Let's see this. Hold on a second. Okay, I don't actually see the citation for this big bold headline. So let's not merge that to master. But they were both brought over, I guess, on the same airlift, which is kind of interesting unto itself. I believe it was reported that Mamdani spent time at Obama's house. Let's check and see if that's true. Zohran, Obama. From White Mouse, Africa Airlift was more than simply a project to educate young people. Okay, right. Well, what's the evidence that it was linked to that? Because that passage did not provide a citation. Airlift Africa. You always got to check your premises. But Zohran was proud to volunteer on Barack Obama's campaign for president. DSA, labor unions. Let's just do a first pass. CIA said to send rebels in Angola. Africa Confidential. U.S. arms airlift to Angola rebels. 1987, U.S. said to send rebels in Angola weapons via Zaire. A highly secret operation. Where is this reported? New York Times. Central Intelligence Agency has used an abandoned airbase to airlift arms. I think it was an Air America affiliate, from what I remember. Let's see. Africa airlift. Maybe I should run a Boolean search. Because I think this is just AID, USAID, of course. Kind of an interesting article, but let me just see if I do it this way. I want to find out a little bit more about this airlift before we go deeper in this. Let's see. Columbia Center for Oral History, Columbia University. African Airlift, African American Institute, background memorandum. The facts on grant to African students airlift summary. On July 26, when Tom Mboya of Kenya visited Senator Kennedy, of course, wow, back when he was a senator, at Hyannisport, the State Department, despite interventions by Mr. Nixon, had with finality turned down a request to provide airlift for over 200 students receiving U.S. scholarships. Senator Kennedy arranged for Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Foundation to finance the airlift when other foundations were not prepared to do so. Fulbright. It urged the State Department to use newly allotted funds to expand its African Scholarship Program. Okay, so this is a State Department operation. The next day, after Mr. Shepley and the State Department had been informed of the decision to go ahead, Truth Squad announced and hailed the State Department grant, outbid and plucked this away from the U.S. government. That's funny. They had like a proxy war. Sorry for the full screen. Let's see. Okay, the African American Students Foundation, AASF. Repeatedly, the State Department was asked to help finance this project. Ultimately, the State Department decided not to, so Kennedy's foundation itself did. There it is, the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs that's under public diplomacy. Also present in the funding discussions were the Carnegie Foundation, interesting, and the Rockefeller Foundation. Could not operate on a crash basis. Well, that's interesting. They didn't want to take responsibility for it if it failed, so the private foundation stepped up and financed it. Would subject the U.S. to criticism at home. Wow. This is a great example of how these like outside NGO foundations step up and do what the State Department wants to do, but can't get done politically. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, here you go. All right. Ford Foundation. Damn, there's a lot of history on this thing over who financed it. Sorry. Let me, I'll try to speed run this. Okay. So finally, there was a State Department grant. The long arm of the family of the junior senator from Massachusetts, JFK, has reached out in an attempt to pluck this project away from the U.S. government. He was concerned at the apparent misuse of tax-exempt foundation money for blatant political purposes. God, this is the program that brought Barack Obama's father over the United States. And Zohran Mamdani's father. Sorry, I think we're getting to the end here. Just a little bit more on this. Now you're going to have like the Obama Foundation funding shit like this. If like the Biden State Department or Harris State Department thinks something's too spicy. Oh, so this is it. The Truth Squad. Blah, blah, blah. State. Assistant Secretary of State. Mr. Mboya telephoned from Africa, alarmed at the failure to secure transportation for the students. Decided he would fly to the U.S. to make a direct appeal. Jeez. Oh my God, this thing is so long. Sorry, guys. Jesus Christ. All right. But where are the... I want to make sure the allegations around... Like, this is one of these things where, like, you have like a square rectangle problem, like where every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square. Like, it's a State Department program. If it was a CIA program, it's necessarily a State Department program. But if it's a State Department program, it's not necessarily appropriate to call it CIA. Maybe I'm making too much of this distinction, but I'm trying to see if this program was used for any purpose that was not consistent with the State Department description of it. Do you see what I'm getting at? Was it Air America? Airlift Africa, Air America, because that was a CIA proprietary airline, or Africa Airlift, I guess it was called, right? In search of black assassins, Africa Airlift greeted Barack Obama Sr. at Hawaii. Stanley Dunham, part of the... Okay, all right. Interesting. Okay, so Stanley Dunham was directly connected to the CIA's EWCHU, East-West Center. Oh, yeah, at Hawaii University. According to Obama, his biological parents, Obama Sr. and Ann Dunham, met at a Russian language class at East-West Center at Hawaii University. Wow. A Russian language class. When Obama Sr. was brought over by the State Department to develop leaders to fight Russian influence in Africa during the Cold War. And Ann Dunham, who would go on to work for USAID during the Cold War in Indonesia, and yet they both need to speak Russian. The East-West Center at Hawaii University was the bastard child of the U.S. State Department directors John Foster Dulles and CIA Director Richard Helms in 1959. It was established by Congress in 1960 as a veil to strengthen relations among people. Is that right? The East-West Center was established by Congress at Hawaii University? Let's look at that a little bit. Yeah, okay, here you go. It was established by Congress? Let's see. A project of the United States government in cooperation with the University of Hawaii. Holy shit. Again, the universities are not what they seem. Center for Cultural Exchange between East and West. It's not some random university center just because it's at the university. A project of the United States government. It's established by Congress. Holy shit, 1 year before USAID was formed. Based on the conclusions reached by Congress and the U.S. Department of State that Hawaii offered special advantages for an Asia-Pacific focus. That sounds familiar. This is the CIA with the Ford Foundation, which Obama's mother was funded by. And so was Mamdani's father, as we'll see. Establishment of area institutes for political, social, economic research. The whole Far Eastern region, our knowledge is extremely limited. Well, that's what the East-West Center would be. Indonesia, Indochina. That was 1951. The CIA says we need it. The East-West Center is created in 1960. In early 1959, as Hawaii's statehood was approaching, the then Senate Majority Leader Lyndon Johnson both agreed that the East-West Center was an idea whose time has come. He proposed the nation establish an international university in Hawaii as a meeting place for intellectuals of the East and West. Was Lyndon Johnson on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee? Senate assignments. Senate committee assignments. Let's see. There was no intelligence committee at the time. Let's see. It'll probably be in his Wikipedia, right? Senator from Texas. Let's go down to his Senate years. Naval Affairs, Truman Committee, Foreign Commerce, Senate Committee on Interstate and Foreign Commerce. It's also on the Armed Services Committee, DOD. Well, as Senate Majority Leader, he's going to be ex officio, right? On foreign relations anyway. He was a Senate Majority Leader. Wow. It's just the head of the whole Senate. That'll do it. That'll put you there. The Department of State assembled an interagency working group. It's going to be State, DOD, CIA. $10 million congressional appropriation supported the creation of the center. I wonder if what CIA coup craft came out of this. I'm just going to start off with something simple. Long been affiliated with CIA activities. Oh, it's funded by the Asia Foundation. Oh my God. This is on state.gov. Memorandum from the Central Intelligence Agency, 1966, right in that time period. He came over in 62, right? Obama Sr. Get out of here. The Asia Foundation proposed improvements in funding procedures. I got to see the original. What does the original look like this? Okay, so this was directly funded by the CIA. What's this document number? Memorandum from the Center. This is on state.gov. Here's the link. 303 Committee. Yep, State Department INR. That's the intelligence wing of the State Department. Secret eyes only. The Asia Foundation proposed improvements in funding procedures. The Asia Foundation, a central intelligence agency proprietary, was established in 1954 to undertake cultural and educational activities on behalf of the U.S. government in ways not open to official U.S. agencies, to serve as a back channel, a CIA proprietary. Over the past 12 years, the Asia Foundation has accomplished its assigned mission with increasing effectiveness, becoming a widely known institution in Asia and the United States. The Asia Foundation is now experiencing inquiries regarding its sources of funds in connection with the U.S. government from aggressive leftist publication ramparts. It's conceivable that such inquiries will lead to a published revelation of the Asia Foundation's CIA connection. This is the State Department freaking out, the intelligence wing of the State Department freaking out that an independent news organization might blow the CIA proprietary cover. And the Asia Foundation funded the East-West Center, where Barack Obama's biological mother and father met. In the present climate of national dissent in the wake of recent press comment on CIA involvement with American universities, we feel public allegation that CIA controls and funds the Asia Foundation would be seized upon and magnified beyond its actual significance to embarrass the administration and U.S. national interests at home and abroad. You're not allowed to control home opinion as the State Department facing outwards. Some immediate defensive and remedial measures are required to stop an independent newspaper from blowing the CIA's cover, the place that was funding where Barack Obama Sr. and mother met. Why the fuck is this not declassified? Why are there 2.5 lines of text that are still not declassified? Why are there 3 paragraphs here not declassified? Why? Okay. Tell Tulsi Gabbard, declassify this shit. Hold on a second. This is a crazy document, guys. In the long run, we feel the Asia Foundation's vulnerability to press attack can be reduced and its viability as an instrument of U.S. foreign policy, instruments of statecraft in Asia, can be assured by relieving it of its total dependence upon covert funding support from this agency. by relieving it of its total dependence on the CIA. Holy shit. In the belief that the Asia Foundation contributes substantially to U.S. national interests in Asia and can continue to contribute if its viability is sustained, CIA requests the committee's study and attention to possible alternative means of financing it. Holy shit. What the fuck? I wonder if termination. So the next year, termination of covert funding with the Asia Foundation. Pursuant to the recommendations of the Katzenbach Committee, is approved by the President of the United States. The Director of Central Intelligence has ordered that covert funding of the Asia Foundation should be terminated at the earliest practical opportunity. In anticipation of the Asia Foundation's dissociation from the agency, the Board of Trustees released to the American and foreign press a carefully limited statement of admission of past CIA support, a carefully limited statement of admission. A year ago, in the same State Department 303 committee said they had total dependence on the CIA and then had to take urgent measures to minimize public blowback in the press. A carefully limited statement of admission. Holy shit. In doing so, the trustee sought to delimit the effects of anticipated exposure of agency support. And if their statement or some future expose does not seriously impair the Asia Foundation's acceptability in Asia to continue operating in Asia with overt, private, and official support. Holy shit. They did the Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty thing. Starts as a CIA proprietary, run by the CIA, cover gets blown, then they transition to outside private donor support, like the Ford Foundation. To date, the March 21 statement, that's a month after it's produced, no serious threat to the Asia Foundation operations in Asia. And now the trustees are prepared to attempt to acquire the necessary support to go on as a private institution, partially supported by overt U.S. government grants like USAID, State Department grants. This will take time, and the Asia Foundation, meanwhile, faces the immediate problem needs for funds. Present funds can support them for another year. The agency is prepared to provide whatever assistance remains. Immediate requirements with the encouragement and support of CIA and guidance of other elements in the U.S. government, like state INR. The trustees publicly declared that it's a private. So the CIA encouraged them to publicly declare, we're a private organization now. That its trustees have accepted funds from CIA intermediaries in the past. From CIA intermediaries. So they're going to try and maintain some plausible deniability to the public. Yeah, we got some funds. We didn't really know it was coming from the CIA. We heard rumors. We didn't really check them. Meanwhile, the State Department's like, yeah. Meanwhile, the CIA's like, yeah. No, literally, they're 100% dependent on us. They are a CIA proprietary. We knew it, they knew it, but we worked with them to craft a carefully limited statement. And now, yeah, they're supported by the U.S. government, but it's not the CIA. Overt U.S. grants. Let's see. USAID, the Asia Foundation. The Asia Foundation, this is December 2024. The Asia Foundation, in partnership with the International City Country Management Association, implementing USAID. Look at this shit. USAID and the Asia Foundation frequently collaborate on various development projects across Asia. They focus on areas like governance, controlling countries' governments, civil society strengthening, capacity building all their little assets in the unions, in academia, in the media, in the judiciary, and economic development. The Asia Foundation, with USAID funding, Oh my God. Oh my God. They literally got busted as a CIA front and then transitioned to being overtly supported by the U.S. aid. We're not covertly funded by the CIA anymore. We're overtly funded by U.S. aid. They literally did the thing. They did the thing. They literally did the thing. We have it on state.gov that they literally planned this whole thing. Overt. Oh, no. With encouragement and support of the CIA, they publicly declared that they're a private institution who now gets overt funds. See. They're not secretly coordinating your country's civil society organizations and government programs to secretly manipulate those groups or the political direction of your country. No, it's not covert action. It's overt by U.S. aid. What? What are you going to accuse the aid? The aid section of the U.S. government is operating as a long arm of the Central Intelligence Agency? Are you saying that we're simply laundering the same CIA operation we were running before and just slapping a U.S. aid label on it? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And these two memos literally show it top to bottom. The construction of that, the planning of it, the meticulous public messaging done. This is unfucking believable. Now it's just U.S. aid. That's unbelievable. CIA hands off the football to U.S. aid. Four paragraphs not declassified. 4 paragraphs still classified on this. So once again, the CIA and the private foundations, the Open Society Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation. Let's see. You think the Asia Foundation works with the Open Society Foundation? Any guesses in the chat? State.gov, Asia Foundation, East-West Center, National Endowment for Democracy. Holy shit. This is in 2012 under Obama. It's a private non-governmental NGO. It was literally created by the Central Intelligence Agency and fully funded by the Central Intelligence Agency. And the State Department write-up on it in 2012 is that it's a private non-governmental NGO. Has local credibility and nuanced understanding of issues facing each country, an extensive access to and relationship with host governments. They're fucking access agents. Extensive access to and relationships with the host governments, as well as local NGOs in the private sector, the businesses. They operate in key countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Indonesia, and China. Hey, does that ring a fucking bell? Afghanistan, Pakistan, Indonesia, and China. What did the CIA say they needed the private foundations to fund. They need the Ford Foundation, the Director of Central Intelligence, need the Ford Foundation. Indonesia, Indochina, India, Pakistan. What was the list here on state.gov in 2012? Afghanistan, Pakistan, Indonesia, and China. It's the same fucking thing. Their long-standing field offices and country representatives are unique and proven resources for the U.S. government. Authorized by the Asia Foundation Act, appropriated funds are the foundation's single most important funding source, enabling it to maintain its strategic presence throughout the region. Non-governmental organization. Unique and proven resources for the U.S. government. This is all you need to know about what NGOs really are. They're just CIA cutouts for the State Department. The America Foundation's program priorities are developed in consultation with the State Department and closely aligned with U.S. foreign policy priorities and goals in Asia. This reads like a fucking CIA memo. Within the strategic goals and priorities of the State Department, the Asia Foundation focuses at the country and regional levels to build democratic institutions, build up organizational assets for the state and CIA and USAID to wield, to improve governance, get laws passed, rule of law, control the courts and the prosecutors, strong and vibrant civil society, control the media, control academia, control the unions, support institutions required for open markets, trade, make money for U.S. companies, capacity building. Can you guys all see this? And more open societies. Wow. Here you go. Here's a list of all these CIA groups, the groups the CIA is working with. Tribal leaders such as the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in the Baluchistan in Pakistan, the Mindanao in the Philippines. Damn, we gotta. This is delicious. This is completely delicious. Hold on a second. Open Society Foundation partnership donor partners. NED, Asia Foundation. This is Open Society Foundation Institute. Open Society Foundation appoints new head for higher education program. In addition to her experience in academia, she's appointed by Bill Clinton to serve on the U.S. Pacific Trade and Investment Policy and consulted for the Asia Foundation. The Social Science Research Council, who's also in the CIA records from 1951 we went over. Oh, and the World Bank. Open Society Foundation. Soros Foundation's Network 2004 report. OpenSocietyFoundations.org. Let's check the Asia Foundation. Here. Senior Director of the Asia Foundation's International Relations Program. He's also the editor of the Open Society Institute publication. Leading news website needs new funding. So what's this? Reporters Without Borders. Holy shit. It's just CIA journos. Asia Foundation, National Endowment for Democracy and Open Society Institute. Holy shit. This shit is crazy, guys. We stumbled on quite a fucking rabbit hole here. Initially established by the CIA. Too good. It's too perfect. One second. I want to look at a couple other things. Asia Foundation, Senior Program Officer for Thailand. Previously worked at the Open Society Foundation. It's the same fucking shit everywhere. Doing joint studies between the Asia Foundation, the Open Society Foundation, the World Bank. You guys noticing a pattern here? Leaked document shows Soros' interest in Malaysia politics. Is the Asia Foundation in here too? Yep. Worked with the Asia Foundation. Holy shit. Okay. Let's get back to our main story here. Wow, that was quite a ride. Okay, so where were we? We were in this article on the Obamas. So the East-West Center, where Obama's mother and father met. Mother at USAID, father brought over by a State Department-sponsored Africa airlift program, both studying Russian at the height of the Cold War in Hawaii at a center created by the State Department at a university, which went on to be funded by the CIA front proprietary Asia Foundation. Holy shit. Now let's see. Looking behind the scenes at the East-West Center, the University of Hawaii, in 1959, Stanley Dunham was part of the EWC Africa Airlift welcoming team that greeted Barack Obama. Stanley Dunham was directly connected to the CIA's East-West Center Africa Airlift project. Do the citations on that work? Let's see. This whole thing started to try to get at the Africa Airlift project, but we're gonna muscle through this if this link doesn't load. Doesn't look like it loads. That's okay. All right. Let's get back to our main story here. Sorry, guys. The next thing I wanted to look at was, I wanted to note this thing, this CIA Democrats article, World Socialist website. Hold on a second. There's a great series here from like a left-wing socialist perspective. There's a whole book written on this? No, this is the World Socialist website. Yeah, right. It's a 3-part series. I'm trying to find it. Yeah, this is the one. It's a very interesting article. I guess it was three articles that this site, I remember reading it at the time and thinking it was fascinating. I'm not sure how well it holds up, but the CIA Democrats, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. The extraordinary number of former intelligence and military operatives from CIA, Pentagon, National Security Council, and state seeking nomination as Democrat candidates for Congress in the 2018 midterms, right after Trump won in 2016. The Democrats got that blue wave flood in 2018. It's like they beefed up. The Democrats, challenged by Trump's foreign policy, put a ton of these foreign policy people up for Congress. The potential influx of military intelligence personnel into the legislature has no precedent in U.S. political history. If the Democrats capture a majority in the House of Representatives in the 2018 midterms, as widely predicted, candidates from the military intelligence apparatus will comprise as many as half of the new Democrats to Congress. That's incredible. Case in point is Alyssa Slotkin, a former CIA operative with 3 tours in Iraq, 23rd District, along the U.S.-Mexico border. Gina Ortiz Jones, an Air Force intelligence officer, advisor for U.S. interventions in South Sudan and Libya. And Jay Hewlings, which describes him as former national security aide on Capitol Hill, whose mother and father were both career undercover CIA agents. Spy versus spy. House of Representatives had a 238 to 193 Republican majority, 40-seat majority in 2016-2018. 1/4 of all Democrat challengers in competitive House districts have military intelligence, State Department, or National Security Council backgrounds. This is by far the largest subcategory of Democratic candidates. National security operatives, 57, outnumber state and local government officials, lawyers, corporate executives, and other professionals. So they ran more CIA. In 2018, the Democrats ran more CIA people for Congress than any other category. Government officials, lawyers, corporate executives, businessmen, wealthy individuals. Of the 102 primaries to choose Democratic nominees, 44 involve candidates with a military, intelligence, or State Department background, with 11 districts having 2 such candidates. In the majority of contests, the military intelligence candidates seem likely to win. Abigail Spanberger, nearly a decade in the CIA. Dan Ward, Marine Corps. Jesse Colvin, Army Intelligence. Jeff Beals, CIA Intelligence Officer, then State Department. Patrick Ryan, tours in Iraq. Shelley Chauncey in Pennsylvania, more than a decade in the CIA. Omar Sadiq, advisor and community partner with the CIA, California. Allison Friedman, endorsed by 2 former deputy directors of the CIA. Pentagon. Advisor to CIA, David Petraeus. JSOC, Democracy, Rights, and Labor, DRL, at State. Samantha Power, National Security Council, International Crisis Group, Director of Policy for the Secretary of State. State Department conflict zones in East and West Africa. We saw this with AOC, too. AOC started her career out of USAID. And AOC is like in every picture with Zohran Mamdani. AOC was spawned out of USAID, too. In college, in late 2009, she airdropped into Nigeria in the middle of a giant civil war, just months before what appears to be a U.S.-backed military coup in early 2010, launched against the sitting government the West had condemned and was cutting aid to. Miami International Development Program at Boston University, funded by USAID. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jr. at Boston University. Amid the political instability, which is a high priority for the U.S. Embassy, State Department travel alert, Nigerian government was in the middle of a power shift. A junta called the Supreme Council of the Restoration for Democracy seized power in a military coup. Leaders of the junta, which are now heading the government, have promised to hold elections and help restore democracy. Coup d'etat in 2010. Government overthrown. Establishment of a fair and free general election. The coup followed a year-long, she arrived there in 2009, political crisis in Nigeria. Dissolved the National Assembly. The dictator that was overthrown faced strong international and regional criticism. Aid was halted. Run by Boston University, the Miami International Development Program is not your typical semester abroad. Academics are not what the experience is about. You'll become a part of the community. You will take part in it. You'll be placed in the community. You will volunteer at a nonprofit dedicated to democracy building. In addition to your community placement, you will take either international development studies or class status and social change to mobilize the population to participate in the coup. She also interned during college for Senator Ted Kennedy on foreign affairs. Yowzas. Boston University alumnus says study abroad program led to career as USAID representative for Niger. Democracy, Rights, and Governance. Worked as BU's study abroad program in Nigeria led him and other program participants to pursue careers at USAID and other influential organizations. This program was instrumental in shaping our careers. Same thing with Obama's father. Same thing with Zohran Mamdani's father. Now let's keep going. We're just scratching the surface here. You guys want the link to the World Socialist website one? Here's the link. Interesting random historical fact. Both Kash Patel and Zohran's fathers were expelled from Uganda by Idi Amin in an anti-Indian ethnic cleansing. Another child of this expelled group, Rishi Sunak, former British Prime Minister. I was going to talk about the remittances and some interesting things, but hold on a second. So this is Zohran Mamdani's father, the guy who just won the DNC nomination for mayor in New York. Now, I found a bunch of really interesting things about this, okay? So he's got a Wikipedia. So he is the professor of government and professor of anthropology, political science, and African studies at Columbia University. Columbia University. Also serves as the chancellor of Kampala International University in Uganda. We're going to get to this. He was previously the director of the Makiri Institute of Social Research in Kampala. Social research. So I went through this in a separate sort of research dive. I don't think I put my notes in this doc, though. But basically what happened with this guy is he grew up he was in Uganda. He gets airlifted to the United States, goes on to Pittsburgh and Harvard, and then goes back to Uganda. And he's at this place, the Makiri Institute. Now, so it's the U.S. government who flew him to the United States. He goes back to Uganda and then gets kicked out by Idi Amin, who was the threat to democracy. Idi Amin, CIA. How CIA harbored intention to kill Idi Amin. Former President Idi Amin is portrayed in recent declassified CIA documents as a leader that ingratiated himself with assassins, bomb makers, and international governments. The CIA singled out former Uganda President Idi Amin for assassination in 1977. During his confirmation hearing in 1977, Stansfeld Turner, who was then U.S. President Jimmy Carter's nominee to head the CIA, was asked if he could think of a situation where he might approve the assassination of a foreign head of state. Admiral Turner replied, "This guy became the CIA director. Not in peacetime, but I wonder if the world wouldn't be a better place if the CIA were to assassinate or assist in the assassination of Uganda's President Idi Amin." This is who shut down the stuff that Zohran Mamdani's dad was doing in Uganda. Turner, the CIA director, further revealed, "I believe my deepest conviction, the greatest strength is the rights of the individual. What better way to demonstrate to the world the depth of our moral dedication to the rights of individuals than have the CIA arrange one of those fatal auto accidents for Idi Amin? In fact, after this is accomplished, the agency might even want to hold a press conference and claim credit for the operation." Holy shit. Well, I wish I had all these notes pulled up on the Idi Amin stuff with this guy because it's fascinating. Hold on a sec. It might be this one. Hold on. Oh, this shit gets so good. Okay. A couple background notes. Here are George Soros's investments in Uganda. So remember, a running theme that I've tried to impress on you guys is that the structure of the blob in the center, you have the State Department, the CIA, USAID, and DOD. It's the center of it. That's what makes shit happen. Underneath that, you have the NGO army that is funded by the government, also funded by outside oligarchs. Over top of that, you have the donor drafter class, which are the oligarchs, which donate to the politicians and then get to select who is in the personnel at state, USAID, CIA, DOD, to carry out the actions that benefit the corporate holdings and financial investment portfolios of the donor drafter class. And the NGO army takes the actions in furtherance of U.S. policy, U.S. foreign policy, U.S. national interests, but that actually benefits the portfolio companies of the corporate financial class, the hedge funds, the private equity funds. And we went over a bunch of examples of Soros doing this, right? The Open Society Foundation got all this money from the government to privatize Russia, and then the Soros Investment Fund invested in all those assets and got to buy them all up, make a shit ton of money. Same thing with the Harvard Institute for International Development. We went over the Mongolia example, where the Open Society Institute in Mongolia was working with the U.S. Embassy in Mongolia in order to exploit the world's biggest copper mine that George Soros was investing in. So that the Soros Investment Fund got to make a shit ton of money because the NGO swarm army of the Open Society Institute was implemented to get better investment deal terms for Soros. Same thing here. Let's look at the the grants and government policy in Uganda, where Zohran Mamdani was. First grant in Uganda in 1994, Emerging Democracies Portfolio. 1998, $250,000 for governance and rule of law, back to our rule of law programs, to control the legal system and the courts and the prosecutors in Uganda. Startup fund, $600,000 to control the media in Uganda. The public health scholarships are very interesting because one of Soros's largest holdings is AstraZeneca and others in the public health space. He literally invests in it. This is the Soros Economic Development Fund, which is the impact investing arm. $10 million for global health, again, while Soros is investing in the companies that sell the health products, the pharmaceutical products. Investing in clean energy in 2015, $12 million. Civic tech in 2016. It's going to be censorship shit. Investing in agriculture funds. Soros invests in a lot of like sugarcane and agriculture related energy things like sugar-based ethanol as a clean energy substitute for fossil fuels. More public health. A $20 million direct investment to Africa Clean Energy. So Soros in 2021, the first year of the Biden administration, invested $20 million, not the Open Society Foundation as a grant, the fucking hedge fund as a for-profit enterprise in this company, Africa Clean Energy. What were they doing? That company was producing sustainable alternatives to gas stoves. Do you guys remember this affair? Trump gas stoves? Free the stoves. Do you remember this big play? Biden declared a war on gas stoves. New York passed a ban on gas stoves. Who's running for the mayor of New York City? The guy from Uganda, backed by Soros money. Well, so this company, Africa Clean Energy Stoves, focuses on clean energy. African Clean Energy focuses on clean energy stoves. So when the government bans gas stoves, Soros makes millions. Africa gas stoves. Carbon offsets. Clean Cook Stoves Africa. Clean Cooking Africa finally starting to get the spotlight it deserves. From Voice of America, started by the Central Intelligence Agency. Environmentalists seek billions for climate-friendly stoves in Africa. Al Jazeera, not everyone has the luxury to ditch harmful gas stoves in Africa. Basically, there was a push in Africa to get rid of cheap, efficient gas stoves because they were said to be harmful. And who profits from pushing that? Clean energy, clean stoves. ACE, Africa, Clean Energy Stoves. Clean Cooking Alliance, Cook Stove Project. 2 new portfolio companies in Kenya scaling up access to clean stoves. So Soros invests in this policy, in this private company. And I'll show you more on this. African Clean Energy. While he's pushing these groups and while the Biden foreign policy is pushing for clean energy transitions and clean energy mandates across Africa, Soros is investing tens of millions of dollars in the very companies who will now have a permanent competitive advantage over other fuel types used because the competitors will be banned under the government that he installs. So he invests early in these companies that then get required to purchase by the government, just like with vaccines. Investing in vaccine companies and then government mandates require you to buy those vaccines. Okay, so a little bit about Zohran's father's background. Born in 1946, went to Nalyango College, then a scholarship to the U.S. after the Africa airlift, Pittsburgh, then Harvard. By 1968, he was back teaching political economy at McKeer University. So he spends 6 years in the U.S., then goes back to Uganda, which is at the heart of the clean energy industry because it's got so much cobalt, which is a very rare earth needed for clean energy transition, as well as oil and gas and copper, which Soros invests in. Remember the copper mine in Mongolia with Soros. But McKeer University is where he went back to in 1968. How much do you think McKeer University gets from USAID? USAID, McKeer University. Financial audit of USAID resources managed by McKeer University. USAID freeze deals blow to Uganda's health and research. Mass job losses included 200 staff at McKeer University. 200 people at this university. 200 at a random university in Uganda, fucking Uganda. Funded by USAID. 200 at one university in fucking Uganda. So Zohran's dad was airlifted to the United States on a State Department program, then returns to his home country of Uganda, which is rich in all these resources and minerals, at a USAID university, then gets kicked out of the country by the dictator that the CIA wants to assassinate, then goes back in 2010. Look at this. USAID launches new network to engage students, just like East-West Center. USAID launches new network to engage students in universities in solving international development projects at McKeer University. McKeer University, all USAID. So what happens then? Exile and return. The 1972 Idi Amin expulsion of Asians stripped Zohran's father of Ugandan citizenship. He then spent the next decade teaching U.S. universities. After Idi Amin's fall, property rights were restored. In 2010, McKeer University courted him to rescue a moribund think tank. He accepted and founded the doctoral program at the McKeer Institute of Social Research, turning it into a continental hub for political studies. Oh, it was a way of paying an intellectual debt. Yeah. And then he goes on to Columbia University, one of the most CIA of all CIA universities in the country. Not only that, Zohran's father served as a board member on the Open Society Institute initiative for East Africa. So the New York City Dem mayors, the guy who just won the Democrat Party nomination for mayor of New York, his dad, whose wealth allowed him to basically lead a limousine liberal socialist life. He hasn't had a job. He's 33 years old, skated by on his family wealth coming from his dad. His dad was part of the Open Society Initiative for East Africa. He was a board member on the Soros board. So not only is he funded by Soros in his campaign, but his dad was was a board member on George Soros's Uganda division. And not only that, remember how I told you that Zohran's dad founded the USAID-funded McKeer Institute of Social Research in 2010, booted it back up in 2010? The program he launched in 2011 was seeded by a $1 million 3-year award from the Open Society Foundation. So when he parachuted back into Uganda, site of the State Department's intended conquest of the cobalt resources, among others, so Zohran gets his pass-through funding from the Open Society Foundation. His dad was on the board of the Open Society Foundation for Uganda. His dad's university center that he founded in 2010 was actually, the seed capital was provided by the Open Society Foundation. And he was also visiting professor, keynote speaker at CEU, which is the Soros University in Hungary. when Zohran ran for state assembly before he just ran for mayor. Largest name contributors, the Ford Foundation. Same Ford Foundation that we covered right here. CIA assistant director memo to the head of the CIA. Kinds of projects we would like to see the Ford Foundation support. How about Zohran Mamdani's run for mayor? New York City. Biggest foundation, biggest contribution. McCurry University and USAID, 1960 to 1979. Remember, USAID was only created in 1961. Uganda got its independence in 1962. McCurry University is still the Ugandan campus of the regional University of East Africa. Okay, you guys seeing this? McCurry University and USAID. 1962, Uganda gets independence. McCurry University at the time was called the University of East Africa. USAID designates the new country a Category A education priority. An omnibus East Africa University Development Project worth $12 million in 1963 money, worth $90 million today, is given to that university. $90 million in today's funding. We gave to the university that Zohran's father started, the Institute for Social Research, and was there from 1968 to 1973, and then 2010 to present. 2010 to at least several years. I'll track down the exact timeline. I think he's still there, or still affiliated. So basically, the very year after Uganda became an independent country, USAID poured $90 million into the very hub that Zohran's father runs, the Institute for Social Research there. Let's see, and I think he's actually McCurry. Of course, he's the director of the Institute for African Studies at Columbia now. Okay, yeah, 2010 to 2022. Capacity building, 1965 to 1970. McCurry becomes a standalone university. USA doubles down, arguing indigenous professoriate is key to post-colonial stability. Two bundled projects dominate: agriculture and big pharma. Capacity building. Then there was a strain when Idi Amin came in, and there was an aid freeze. So McCurry University was USAID's flagship East African campus, a Cold War bet that modern universities would anchor liberal nation building. Straight out of the CIA. As we saw, East-West, the Asia Foundation, they gave it USAID funding when they thought the heat was too much from getting CIA funding. When it's too dirty for the CIA, you give it to USAID. There's a whole other rabbit hole here around Cargill and like U.S. agriculture interests.